Okay, let's get started. My name is Crystal Hooper. I'm going to be moderating today's event, and I'm happy to introduce you to Crystal Blue. She is the branch manager for the North Plainfield Memorial Library, part of the Somerset County Library System of New Jersey. She is going to talk to us today about libraries going fine-free. I'm going to hand it over to Crystal, and if everyone would please keep themselves muted and type any questions they have in the chat. Thank you, Crystal, for being here.
All right, thank you, Crystal and NJALA for inviting me. I'm happy to be here and share some of my experience and our library's experience with making the case for eliminating library fines. I'm going to jump right in. In today's presentation, I'll share how a multi-branch, multi-department team from Somerset County Library System made a case to library stakeholders for eliminating library fines. We'll go over why eliminating fines is a positive move for bringing back patrons, improving equity, and creating a more welcoming library environment. Some misconceptions regarding fines, communicating with stakeholders, and why now is a good time to make moves towards a fine-free library. And throughout, I'll highlight some of the resources and data used to make our case, but note I will list them on a slide at the end of this presentation, so you don't have to feel like you have to quickly jot down some of the things, resources that I mentioned. Before getting started, a brief overview of Somerset County Library System. We have 10 full service branches serving 15 municipalities across Somerset County, encompassing approximately 188,000 residents. Our system is a bit unique within New Jersey in that, one, there are municipalities within Somerset County that are not part of our library system, and combining that with our branch buildings are owned and maintained by the municipalities in which they are located. And all the staff and all the resources, though, within those buildings are associated with the county. Um, uh, and I'll touch a bit about why this mattered in terms of communicating with our stakeholders a little later in this presentation. So in December of 2020, our county library administrator put together a task force of 5 staff members from various branches across our system. The task force consisted of 3 circulation supervisors, a youth services supervisor, and myself, a branch manager. At the time, all of us interacted with patrons on a daily basis at our circulation desk. We were asked to prepare a presentation for our February 2021 Library Commission meeting, making a case for eliminating library fines. We've actually been fine-free since March of 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and our Library Commission have voted multiple times to extend the suspension of fines due to COVID-19 through December 31st, 2021. Our county commissioners made a final decision on going permanently fine-free at their October 2021 meeting, so fairly recently. And I'm happy to say that beginning January 2022, we will be permanently fine-free. So libraries have considered the effectiveness and impact of library fines on users for over 40 years. 15 years ago, the American Library Association released a statement titled Economic Barriers to Information Access, an interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights, where they stated the essential mission of a publicly funded library is to provide free, equal, and equitable access to information in all its forms. While the roles, goals, and objectives of publicly supported libraries may differ, they all share this common mission. Just as economic issues may challenge the library's ability to meet its mission, economic barriers may also threaten user access. In 2019, the American Library Association amended their statement, adding a resolution on monetary library fines as a form of social inequity, making a clear statement that library fines create a barrier to access and that the elimination of fines increases library card adoption and library usage. From this statement, we looked at our library's mission, vision, and strategic priorities. Somerset County Library System has a clear mission to be partners with our community, to connect, to explore, to share, and to discover. In 2018, with input from the community, we identified strategic priorities and core services to guide our work to strengthening our communities. Some of our strategic priorities were to be welcoming, creating meaningful interactions, providing access and expertise that meets the needs of our community. We felt overdue fines and fear of incurring fines were barriers to our ability to accomplish the goals set forth in our strategic priorities and core services. Take a moment to think about your library's mission statement, strategic plans, and note how fines can be a hindrance to achieving the goals that your library has set forth. ALA's statement also touched on providing equitable access to information. If you, your library, and the community it serves are concerned about issues of equity, the removal of library fines can be a key step to providing equitable access to information. In making our case, one of our data points that we illustrated was the difference in poverty levels throughout the communities we served. Overall, Somerset County has a 5.4% of their residents living in poverty. In comparing the 15 municipalities in our service area, the number of people living in poverty ranged from 2.2% to a high of 13%. So it varied across our county. The majority of the municipalities we served were under that 5.4%, but we had about 3 or 4 who were significantly over. We coupled that information with a report out of San Francisco released in 2019. The report was titled Long Overdue, Eliminating Fines on Overdue Materials to Improve Access to San Francisco Public Library. It was released by the Financial Justice Project, a government department of the city's Office of the Treasurer and Tax Collector, tasked with reforming how fees and fines assessed by the city of San Francisco impact low-income residents. Their report found no difference in return behavior based on patron wealth, but there were larger debt amounts and higher account blockage in lower income communities due to an inability to pay fines. Essentially, everyone, regardless of income, returned materials late. However, lower income residents could not pay the fines and thus stopped using the library. Somerset County Library staff on the front lines of patron interactions and qualitative research studies show that there's little correlation between charging late fees and the return of materials. Fines didn't help us successfully meet our strategic priorities and core service goals. Here's what we do know about fines. They create negative customer experience. Patrons exhibit embarrassment and fear when interacting with staff to address fines. Staff must say no instead of yes to connecting patrons with materials and needed information. Fines decrease visits and circulation. Patrons avoid visiting the library when they have long overdue items. Some community members don't visit at all in fear of accumulating debt. And fines block access. Patrons most in need lose access due to the inability to afford fines. This can be due to not only blocked accounts, but also due to patrons choosing to self-limit in fear of accumulating fines. I have to tell you, just this week, I had a patron who hadn't used the library since 2018, and she took out a bunch of children's books. The books were all returned, but because we have high circulation limits, you can take out up to 75 items. So a few days late, those fines pretty much add up. But she had received the message that we had gone fine free and that we would be clearing everyone's records of their past late fees. And so she came back to the library to check out materials. And again, she hadn't been in our building since 2018. We also focused our presentation a bit on removing barriers to library services for children and teens. The Libraries for Children and Young Adults section of the International Federation of Library Associations states, libraries for children and young adults are essential for information and development. It is in childhood and youth that all kinds of literacy skills are best built. Early childhood literacy is important. The earlier a person starts to access information, the more efficient and lifelong this access will be. Libraries for children are the key to equal possibilities for all access to information. We in libraries actively work to engage young minds and families to promote the benefits of literacy. What are your priorities in terms of outreach to children and families? Do you do library card signups in schools, story times, promote 1,000 books before kindergarten programs, STEM programming? All of these efforts promote library usage and literacy. Fines, I believe, go against this work. Frontline public service staff shared stories of witnessing parents limiting checkouts out of fear of accumulating fines, and young children who stopped coming to the library for years because of the inability to pay overdue fines, only to return as young adults in need of access for homework and having to negotiate with staff to make their accounts active again. More information regarding fines and children can be found in the Colorado State Library and Institute of Museum and Library Services paper titled Removing Barriers to Access, Eliminating Library Fines and Fees on Children's Materials. We did a bit of research on the history of library fines and why they've been implemented. What we found is that historically there are 3 reasons why libraries have implemented fines: as an incentive to return library materials on time so that others may have access to limited resources, as a way of teaching responsibility and respect for library resources, and as a source of income. But again, these are unreliable and inequitable reasons for keeping fines in place. Let's look a little closer at the concerns some may have with the elimination of fines. 1, items not returned. Fine-free libraries such as Montclair Public Library and Salt Lake City Public Library have seen a significant increase in the return of previously lost items and have had a negligible increase in wait times for popular items. Teaching responsibility. As previously mentioned, fines disproportionately affect lower income patrons. Users who can afford to pay overdue fines do so, and those who can't accrue debt and blocked accounts due to overdue fines. Additionally, we did not propose the total elimination of accountability. Libraries who are fine-free continue to charge fees for lost or damaged materials. Our integrated library systems are set up to block checkouts when patrons have reached the limit of checked out items. So it's not like they can kind of take our whole collection and never return it and keep it forever. And third, impact on library budgets. For our library, overdue fines account for less than 1% of the library's budget. Additionally, overdue fines are a depreciating source of income. Our system turned on automatic renewals on items without holds, and we see yearly increases in use of digital materials, which are automatically returned and have no overdue fines associated with them. So why now? While putting together our presentation to our library commission, we wanted to show them that now was the best time for moving forward with going permanently fine-free. We used this graphic to illustrate some recent changes, some initiated by our library system prior to COVID-19, and some due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We noted that in February of 2020, this is pre-COVID, we simplified our fine schedule so that the majority of the library materials had the same fines. So in the past, our DVDs and video games, which have high circulation, they had fines of $1 a day late fees. And so these items, we had way more DVDs and video games. They weren't kind of rare. So we simplified that and reduced the late fee to 20 cents. Then, of course, March 2020, the COVID pandemic shut down most of the country. So we suspended fines. Then in July of 2020, our buildings in Somerset County opened back up, and that's when to the public. And that's when we enabled our auto renewal ILS feature. So items are automatically renewed up to 10 times. Lucky Day, interlibrary loans, and items with holds are not renewed. For us, our Lucky Day items are like new releases in books and DVDs, and we recently added some Lucky Day hotspots to them. And these items in the past and in the future have never been able to be renewed. They're just kind of, usually they have high holds on them, the titles. And so we created this collection of kind of rentals, so to speak. So if they're in, they're in. It's your lucky day. So those items aren't renewed, but everything else has an automatic renewal on it. And then in November and a couple of times after that, we've extended the suspension of fines, again, due to the impact of COVID-19. Even though we opened our buildings back up in July of 2020, we know we were at limited capacity, so we didn't have as many people coming in, and people were still fearful of coming out in the public and visiting places. And so we extended it, finally extending to December 31st of 2021. And then now, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, in October of 2021, we've made it a final push. Our commission voted permanently to go fine-free. And we see it as a move towards equity and meeting our strategic priorities and core values. So we're excited for January 2022, when we can say that we are finally permanently fine-free. So libraries across the country have recognized their ability to remove a barrier to access to information through the elimination of fines. Here's a map of libraries who have gone completely fine-free in green, partially fine-free in orange, and in the process of removing fines in red. This is a self-reported map representing over 800 public libraries gathered by Andy Woodworth, a librarian with the Camden County Library System here in New Jersey. His website is listed on the slide, inlibraryfines.info. And in addition to this map, he has a great list of articles and research in support of going fine-free. Now let's talk a little bit about who you have to convince that this is a good idea. So your stakeholders. First, you might need to start with convincing your library director, highlighting other libraries who have made the move, connecting the move to your library strategic plan, and improved customer service are key to getting buy-in. Your library commission or board of trustees are usually the people who will ultimately vote and decide on eliminating fines. This is the first group that we had to convince to eliminate fines. For our library commissioners, the data and information from libraries who had already made the move was really important. Our library is often recognized in the Library Journal Star Library Index, which rates per capita service output statistics in the areas of library visits, circulation, including e-circs, program attendance, and public internet computer use. So we looked at our 4 and 5-star peers in our budget category and found at the time that 74% of the libraries listed were fine-free. And I will say, since we've given this presentation in early 2020, more of those libraries have gone fine-free. You might remember earlier when I discussed the uniqueness of our library system. So while our library commission are the decision makers for any policy changes, they wanted feedback from municipal level groups and patrons. The way our system is set up, our physical buildings are municipal properties that are maintained by the owning municipality. The majority of our fine money we collect is redistributed to the hosting municipalities, and the funds are either managed by a locally appointed library advisory committee or given directly to the municipality's kind of business office where they maintain it. How the funds are used varies from location to location, but they were mostly used to supplement programming, pay for our copier leases, and purchase small kind of decor items for our branches. Over the last few years, the county library has absorbed those costs, but we still wanted to let them know that we were thinking of what we were thinking of doing and getting their feedback. So we scheduled 3 forums and invited these stakeholders to listen and ask questions. Our presentation to these groups were consistent across each session, and most representatives recognized going fine free as a positive move for their residents. For some libraries, their friends group and or foundations may be important stakeholders to loop in when making the case for going fine free. These groups may be able to replace lost funds, funds lost by going fine free. So you definitely, if you have really great supporters and additional supplemental funders, you want to loop them in and let them know what you're doing. We relied on input and information from staff members in all areas of our library. Public service staff were able to share their experiences interacting with patrons and addressing library fines. Our finance department provided data on income. Our automation department provided information about blocked accounts. Our marketing department created awesome slideshow templates that allowed us to create a visually appealing presentation. All staff will be involved in communicating this change effectively and answering questions from patrons. We are currently working on marketing and PR material for patrons, announcing the elimination of fines and answering common questions about going fine free. In researching how other libraries communicated their message, I was really impressed with the Q&A put together by Ocean County Library System, which you can check out on their website. They answered a lot of common questions and concerns in a clear and concise manner. One of the most common questions or clarifications that need to be addressed is the difference between late fines and lost item fees. We found that a lot of patrons were confused by that. During our suspension of fines, many patrons were concerned when they received, replacement cost notices, because they thought like we're not charging any money, but we had to explain to them like you still have to bring the items back. And so we know things move to loss and after a certain amount of weeks, and so we had to explain that to them. And so it's important to be clear in that communication. So during our presentation, we kind of showed this slide to our library commissioners and stakeholders, and we wanted to highlight some of the headlines from national publications that show that fine-free libraries are making the news. The day prior to our commissioners voting on permanently eliminating library fines, news of New York Public Library going fine-free was released, and I believe sharing these national headlines were impactful to getting a vote in favor of eliminating fines. To conclude, we anticipate going permanently fine-free, having a positive impact on library services. We believe it'll be a positive patron-staff interactions, increase in circulation, an increase in library visits, increase in new card holders, and praise from our communities. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues who worked with me on this project. Jen Fitzgerald, she was our youth services supervisor and our Manville branch. Sharon Franklin, circulation supervisor at the branch that I managed, our North Plainfield branch. Crystal Hooper, who when we first presented this project, she was a circulation supervisor at our Somerville branch, but she's moved on to other positions within our system. And Susan Kane, our regional circulation supervisor and branch manager. And again, as I mentioned, it really took a team across our system to put together and shape this presentation. Here are the resources that I mentioned throughout the presentation. These are the main ones that I've mentioned, but there were a lot of other resources that I looked at. I will say there are so many libraries who have done this before and who have shared their process, and so it's pretty easy to kind of find those presentations and those resources that they use. I will say in shaping kind of how I looked at things, I found it really helpful to watch other libraries board meetings and read their board minutes, so you can get a sense of kind of what questions stakeholders ask when presenting the idea or making your case for eliminating fines from your libraries. I'd be happy to speak with anyone regarding our library process and to answer any questions. And speaking of questions, this is the end of my presentation. I hope it wasn't too painful. And I have my contact information here, and I know we have plenty of time to ask questions and go over questions now. I think Crystal Hooper is gonna manage that. I am the person on the left, for those who don't know, and the person on the right is the late illustrator and author Jerry Pinkney, and so I got a chance to meet him, so that's great. So here's my email. My email is cblue@sclibnj.org. That's my work email. If you want to contact me at my private email, it's crystal_blue@gmail.com. So that's it for me, and open to questions.
Thank you, Crystal. We did get a few questions in the chat.
Sure.
So to start, what point do you think was most persuasive in convincing your library commission to go permanently fine-free?
Sure. So the response, there are a couple of points. So our library commissioners, and again, as I said, we did this presentation for our local mayors and library advisory committees. The equity issue was one point that really kind of touched them in terms of why we were making this case. But I think it was they really appreciated, like, we really spent a lot of time connecting Fine Free with our strategic plans and using the language of our strategic plans and making our presentation. So our commissioners, they spend a lot of time on these strategic plans. And so they want to make sure that these efforts are connected in some way, and that we're just not kind of coming out of left field with that. Thirdly, the connection with children and telling those kind of personal stories and how this impacts literacy for children were, again, really, I think, what the feedback that I got, and I'm grateful that I did get feedback from these groups. Those were really kind of what kind of convinced them. And then lastly, we weren't the first ones to do this, and so they were able to see how other libraries were able to manage with this change. I hope that answered it.
Thank you. And another question, would it be easier to start with children and youth as going fine-free before an entire library system?
Yeah, so our group, we really felt like just limiting to children and youth it creates a couple of questions, because in our libraries, for instance, people can take out materials from any part of the library regardless of their age. So adults take out children's materials if they're teachers or parents. Children sometimes take out adult materials for children and teens, just for their personal reading habits. And so we didn't want to get into like how we would kind of separate that out and manage it. And we also felt that, I mean, it's not only children who need our support in terms of equity issues. There are adults who have issues, who are living in poverty, and so we wanted to address those issues. So we really pushed, and this was something that our even our library administrator and our commissioners came back at us with, in terms of like, why don't we just do children's? And we really kind of fought hard to make it an across the board kind of situation. And then also in my experience working with for instance, if you just make it on children's cards, for instance, like in my experience, a lot of times when a parent's card got blocked, they would start using their children's card to check out materials for themselves and their children. And so that created, that really created a big mess sometimes. So, yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, I mean, your kind of community and your decision makers, of course, better than I do. And so I wouldn't totally discourage if, you think that's all they will be kind of willing to accept. Definitely take that step and just do children's if that's what it is. And maybe you could use it as a test case.
Okay, there's one more question in the chat, which I will answer. This presentation getting recorded? It is getting recorded, and the NJALA is working on getting our previous presentations and this one uploaded to our website or on our YouTube channel. But if you need a copy of the slides or the full presentation, you can email njalaconference@gmail.com and our committee will work with you directly to get this information you need. And at this time, I just want to invite anybody to type in any more questions or to unmute themselves if they're feeling brave enough to talk. Oh, here's another question. Do you know of any library that went fine-free and then changed their mind and went back to fining?
I don't. And I will add, we did look for that. We certainly did look for that. And I will, I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing maybe, or do you want me to keep my contact slide up? I may go back to that. Sorry, I just went back to it. It's kind of awkward. I wanted to see the chat, but I can't. So we did look for that. We couldn't find any in the literature. I will say, surprisingly, now we're seeing a lot of like news articles and reports on libraries going fine-free, but there really isn't a whole lot of research on it. It's not something that our academies are spending a lot of time doing research, so you don't get a really good history, so to speak, of fine-free. And so seeing libraries, but I do know, like library, for instance, San Francisco, for a long time, I think since the 70s, they were fine-free on children's materials. And then it's been fairly recently that they just included kind of all materials. And so, yeah, so we did look and we didn't get, we couldn't find anyone who kind of reversed course. There have been mentioned that years ago when there were like big cuts in libraries across the library budgets across the nation, the thought of going fine-free kind of waned. But again, we're seeing a big groundswell to move in that direction right now.
That's very interesting. Thank you. How long is a book out in your system before it is considered lost and a fee is requested?
Sure. I think we're at 35 days past the due date is when we generate lost notices. And as I mentioned, that number is the amount of notices that we are generating. I could only assume is going down completely since we have automatic renewals. And so items can be automatically renewed in our system up to 10 times, or are automatically renewed up to 10 times unless someone else places a hold on that item. So yeah, so at about 35 days past due is when it generates a loss notice. Or we generate.
I have a question for you. Have
Sure.
you heard any feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, from patrons now that this news is getting out that we're going permanently fine-free?
Yeah, I mean, people are excited. It's funny, people are they're grateful for the change. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, like just this week, we had a woman who came back in and she hadn't checked out materials since 2018, and I could tell on her account because it was blocked from fines from 2018, and she wouldn't have been able to. But I know she hadn't come into. I hadn't seen her in the library. I recognized her. I hadn't seen her in the library in a few years, and it was the news that we were eliminating fines and also kind of wiping people's slate clean. Um, that brought her back into the library. And then just a little added, if you do decide to go fine free, have a little like money collection bin at your desk, because a lot of people, and we have one of those, a lot of people, like, they still wanted to kind of pay us even though we were like, no, it's okay. They wanted to kind of leave something for the library, so they would drop some change into that collection bin, and I feel like we've collected more money since going fine free, and kind of our donation jar. So yeah, so people are happy, and yeah, they're still grateful to support the library. One of the things I will say, I mean, we all work at the circulation desk, and people come up to us and they really tell us like everything that's going on with their life. They're like so happy, not so happy, but I mean, when something is late, they give us all these excuses and they share all this personal information. And like, usually I'm the one, I was like, oh, we're just happy to get the book back. It's okay. We'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. And sometimes they are so stressed, and I like feel bad for them, because I just want to say, I was like, we really just want the book back. We don't really necessarily need your money because you're a few days late. So yeah, that's kind of the responses that we've gotten.
Thank you. And just to clarify, did the Somerset County Library System clear existing fines when they went fine free? But so like they were intact where the lost or damaged fees stayed on people's records? Or was it a complete clean slate?
Yeah, so we're actually in the process of doing that. So our accounts haven't been cleared as of yet, but again, because of COVID, we were really kind of overriding those checkouts. But we are our systems librarians, our automation librarians, will be working on a way to kind of clear everything with the exception of lost materials. So we will be clearing everybody's accounts of late fees only.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And once the decision to go fine free has been decided, how long would you say it takes to transfer the back end, the system-wide policies and procedures, the signage, the marketing, other things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it really is for us. Things as a big organization, things tend to move, in my opinion, sometimes a little slower than I would like. So we are hoping for like kind of everything to be ready in January to kind of launch. But as I said, we're still fine free as a result of kind of like COVID, and so we hope by January we can clear everything on the back end, and our marketing department will have kind of, I know they're working on kind of the Q&A, the press announcements, because they've reached out to me for information. So I know that's something they're working on. And so hopefully, a couple of months, but it really, I mean, it depends on how agile your organization is. You can kind of make the decision and just do it right away. Do it right away if you want.
One of our attendees says they work in an affluent community and it's hard to convince the director that there are people who need us to be fine free. Any
Mhm.
thoughts?
Well, I mean, Somerset County has a range, in terms of the areas we serve. Um, you can kind of one thing I think, kind of showing other kind of similar communities that have gone fine free and kind of talking to them is one way to convince them. Um, one thing sometimes I think of is like usually fines are so small. I think of it as like kind of nickel and diming people who already like their taxes have already paid for these books and they're already returning them. You could come to it from a customer service angle. There are always a lot of concerns with like if your community puts a lot of items on hold, you want to showcase kind of how there's not really a connect, like it doesn't like increase your wait time too often. And yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how helpful that is. I hope it is. um but I mean, like the facts are the facts. I mean, the issues of equity um, are really important, but uh, for a community where maybe that's not an issue, I don't know how much convincing.
It sounds
Sorry.
like that will be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what feedback did you receive from the staff once this announcement was made? Did they have any feelings or misgrudges after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, those who might have had misgrudges didn't reach out to me, but I certainly got a lot of feedback from my colleagues who were just like excited to make this move. I will say, in talking to staff and making this, when we were making our presentation, and also because I also kind of work at the circulation desk, like like it can be like really stressful to like tell someone like, oh, you owe us this money. And it's not like a good feeling. And so I did hear feedback from staff that were like a little bit relieved that they didn't have to kind of have these conversations with patrons in terms of like paying these late fees, the late fines. And so I would assume it would be, it's always less stressful not to tell people that they owe you money. So yeah, I would assume that the response is they like the move. Let's hope that. I haven't really. It seems a overall consensus of a good thing to do from
That's
staff.
good to hear. Yes. There's no more questions that are in the box.
Mhm.
But as before, if anyone would like to unmic themselves, or if you have more questions, go ahead and add them in. Otherwise, we're getting near the end of our time. So I just want to let you know what is coming up next for the NJALA. We're going to have on November 18th a networking session where our conversation topic is going to be getting ready for the holidays. So what does it mean to work in a library and balancing all the various holidays that come up at the end of the year? What kind of programs and events do you do to celebrate, or are you not allowed to celebrate? We're going to vent a little bit on that. Then on December 2nd, we're going to have another networking session, and the topic will be around managing difficult patron interactions. So we'll share tips and we can share horror stories of what has gone on in our lives in libraries. And then our last event of the year is a final networking session where you'll get to meet some more of the NJALA committee members, and we're going to talk a bit about what you guys want to see happen for 2022 and what some of our plans are for the next year. Let me flip back and see. I don't see any other questions. I'm going to just stop talking for a second in case anyone else wants to.
Don't forget to mention that if anybody's interested in joining our committee, let us know.
That's true. Yeah. If anybody wants to volunteer their time, get to know the committee, you can email us. You can we'll invite you to some of our meetings, and then you can find out where we need help. We're always open to more help, and really any little thing that you think you can contribute is much appreciated from our committee. I'm seeing lots of thank yous in the chat. So thank you again, Crystal, for joining us and talking about this topic today.
My pleasure.
Thanks,
My
Crystal.
pleasure.
All right.
Hi. Good to see
Thank
some
you
of my
all.
old coworkers too.
That's right.